Cup Finals, Overtime Hockey Talk, here to break down games 1 and 2. My name is Mark Paul, Justin Baker, my co-host, and this has been a fantastic start to a series. It feels like for the first time in a little while, we're getting a series that maybe could go 7 games. Are we getting that vibe?
That's what I'm getting right now.
The overtime vibe, and it was. I was surprised. It's the first time there was an overtime finals game since 2016.
Has it really been that long?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's. You just assume that. All right. Well, like once every 4 games, there's an overtime game or something. You know, it feels like in the regular season, what teams go to overtime 15 to 20 times a year. So yeah, like a 1 in 4. I don't know the exact math, but it feels right. Game 1. I know we're a few days past that by now, but headed into game 1, I think we both had the Blues ultimately winning this series. Is that?
Yes, we did.
Yes. I said in 7. I believe you said in 6.
Correct.
And I think in game 1, they came out, scored those 2 goals early, but it never really felt like they had a lead anyways. Like it was just Boston pouring it on and pouring it on. I think I tweeted from our Overtime Hockey Talk at OT Hockey Talk on Twitter, just that, you know, it felt like, okay, yeah, they have a 2-0 lead, but there is nothing that the Bruins are doing wrong here. I mean, I think they had 16 scoring chances to the Blues 3, and the Blues just happened to score on 2 of them.
Right. I think second period they outshot the Blues 18-2.
Yeah.
It was clearly a case of, you know, the Blues took advantage of some mistakes early from Boston, scored a couple goals, and, you know, really I think it was just them getting their legs back. They were just a little rusty, a little sluggish coming out in the first, and, you know, Boston just weathered the storm early and then got it going, and they took over, I mean, towards the end of that first and never looked back.
Yeah, and Binnington looked human. I would say that, surprisingly enough, he has not necessarily been the story for the Blues.
Yeah, I would point the finger towards maybe Tarasenko or O'Reilly.
Yeah, I mean, it's really shifted from in the regular season. Once they turned things around, I mean, they basically went to Binnington and they fired their coach, and away we go. And the Blues, that's, you know, end of the story. They're in the Stanley Cup Finals. Well, it's not the end of the story, but it feels like after maybe that Dallas series, though, it's really been. I mean, he had some rough games against the Sharks, and then he has a not the greatest game 1. He definitely bounced back in game 2, but those 2 goals that he gave up, they weren't great in game 2. You know, you never like to see a 5-hole goal go in, especially when you're watching on that second goal. He lifts his stick up.
That was terrible.
Lifts his stick up, and in reality, the spot where his stick went from covering on the ice to in the air it would have hit him in the pad anyway. So it was he really was making himself smaller by lifting his stick, and you know, maybe that's something that the Bruins have watched. Maybe he's lifting his stick. It's at certain times, cutting across in the butterfly.
Yeah, it's kind of like how Columbus took advantage of Vasilevsky high glove side. They knew he would just keep it down, and they exposed it. And maybe the same thing for Binnington too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been mediocre. He's .915 save percentage, which is fine.
I mean, he was the second star of the game. Not that really.
No, I don't really think he
second
was
star
good,
of the game, but in Boston, you know. So that's some heavy Boston guys giving him the nod for.
Yeah, but St. Louis, man, they played their game and took it to him. And I think I heard something that was kind of interesting, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. So game 1, St. Louis, you could tell their game plan shifted from game 1 to game 2, right? Game 1, their D, they were trying to do a lot of blue line to blue line stretch passing, whereas game 2, they were playing dump and chase and go bang the body around and go get the puck. And a lot of people are saying that they kind of took that blue line to blue line stretch thing from Toronto.
From the Leafs. Because it did work.
It worked a little bit, yeah. I mean, obviously they didn't win the series, but it worked for a few games.
Yeah.
So, and obviously St. Louis went back to what they do best, and I think that's how they should continue to play. But
you can't go stretch passes with a guy like Patrick Maroon out on the ice.
No, not at all, right?
And I'll be honest, like in game 1, Maroon was almost invisible.
Right.
And game 2, he was. I mean, every time he was on the ice
at the bench, this is great.
But every time he was out on the ice, And in the offensive zone, he was creating things. I mean, he's not fast, but he's putting on really timely hits that is forcing the Bruins to make mistakes in their own zone. However, speaking of your own zone, I do have to point out one thing. I've been counting. I don't know why I started this in game one. I've been counting how many times I have seen the Blues have an opportunity to very clearly exit the zone, whether it be a full dump out and ice the puck or a pass out of the zone where it gets intercepted by a Bruins defenseman or forward at the blue line. Mm-hmm. I've counted 8 so far in this series.
Interesting.
There was 3 in the first maybe 25 minutes of the game in game 1. Well, that's where I started counting because I was just, holy smokes, this is the 3rd time that they've turned the puck over at the blue line, and it created a legitimate chance for the Bruins. And I mean, that's, to me, you are just asking for it. And it happened on the
David Perron. He tried to backhand it and failed to clear it out. Yeah,
exactly. And so it did come back to bite them. And if they don't stop giving the puck away at the blue line, and I think it's something I've noticed throughout these playoffs with the Bruins, they are very good at getting their stick on the puck when the other team is trying to clear the puck. I mean, it's just maybe something that they're positioning, whatever they're doing, it's working. They did it a lot against Toronto. They did it against Columbus. Carolina, I didn't really notice because the series was over so fast, but They have hemmed just when you think the other team's going to get it out. When the Blues are going to get it out, they somehow hold it in, and that is just a recipe for disaster. Watch for that through the rest of the series. See if they clean it up, or maybe it results in more turnovers.
Yeah, very good point.
Game 2, overtime. Carl Gunnarsson in the 3rd period rings one off the pipe. It was a heavy shot. I mean, you could feel it was like the puck came in. It's not too often that it hits the post, and it almost feels like it didn't come flying back as fast as you thought it would. It's like the post it was so hard the post absorbs the shot and then spit it out. I mean, just an absolute blast. And it's not like Carl Gunnarsson is a big offensive guy anymore. He was, I think he had some 35-ish. He
had a few good seasons
with the Leafs. Yeah. Then he gets the puck in overtime, and he actually gives the puck away and gets it back on the delayed penalty. From your perspective as a goaltender, you saw maybe what Rask was seeing in that moment. Give me your analysis on Tuukka Rask on the Gunnarsson overtime goal in game 2.
Well, he was screened, very, very well by Ryan O'Reilly, was it, I think?
I think it was O'Reilly, yeah.
Yeah, very good screen, but so you can't completely fault Tuukka Rask for that goal at all. But I think the one thing I will say, watching that play over and over again, Tuukka Rask keeps his head down, which a lot of goaltenders will do when they're screened, right? They try to look under the legs, look under the arms to try to find these little spots, but it was funny to me because the puck was clearly going his blocker side and coming over. And as a goaltender, when you're trying to look around a screen, you don't remove your face completely from the right side of Ryan O'Reilly on his blocker side. He should have kept his face out watching to see if the puck goes further over towards the glove side post and then transition his face around to try to watch that. Instead, he just kind of kept his face right at Riley's ass and just didn't move it. And I'm like, he wasn't even trying to look for it.
Rather than trying to extend and go around, he's trying to look underneath. And,
So maybe that's one thing you could point to and say, okay, Tuukka, you should have done that. But at the same time, it was a pretty damn good screen. So
it was a nice shot. I mean, we'll say it was virtually a power play goal at that point. I mean, they did
6 on 5. Yeah,
they had possession for a second, and they were cycling it around pretty well. So well done, St. Louis Blues. You finally won a Stanley Cup playoff game.
Yes, 0-12 before this, which was just crazy to think about.
So now the series is all tied at 1. We're going back to St. Louis. This is the first time there's been a finals game in St. Louis
Saturday night.
50 years, essentially.
It's going to be great.
What are your expectations heading into game 3? Is this the Bruins are going to kind of grab this thing and turn it around? or are the Blues was this the Blues coming out party against the Bruins? Like they kind of had their game and.
Well, I will say, so I think St. Louis did find a little bit of a formula that works for them against Boston. I'm not a huge believer in momentum, but I will say going into St. Louis for the first time at how many years for this Stanley Cup final game, it's going to be a party, just like Vegas was the first Cup game there. So I think for Boston, they've got to weather the storm a little early. Those first 5-10 minutes are going to be all St. Louis, just running off adrenaline. I haven't heard a lot of David Pasternak's name outside of how terrible he played in Game 1, so I'm interested to see.
And then Game 2, I think it was what was it? Was it Keith Jones on the NBC broadcast that just wouldn't stop ripping Brad Marchand?
Oh,
if it wasn't him, it was somebody else on that broadcast. Was just no. I'm sorry, it was Mike Milbury.
Right.
Mike Milbury was saying how man, rookies don't even make these mistakes. Because Marchand left
right on the 2-on-1 on the
he left
that Tarasenko goal
Shen and went over to
he left
Tarasenko,
Schwartz and just tried to pinch, which was stupid.
And I mean, yes, it's stupid. Yeah, okay, he should have taken the body. He doesn't get the puck, and he also just Tarasenko squirts right past him, no problem. And it's not like Marchand doesn't have speed or it's not. He didn't all of a sudden become dumb.
Right.
And it was like, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily a fair analysis of his game. I mean, he had a rough game maybe, but he's not all of a sudden a horrible player. He made a couple mistakes. Okay, fine. It just happens
he's the
to be in
leading point getter in the tournament still.
Right.
So, for me though, with Boston, I'm interested to see if their stars show up a little bit more than they have already.
Well, that top line needs to show. I mean, I would say even Bergeron to a point that he's only been mildly effective
in the faceoffs dot, and that's about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So if Boston can get their top guys going, it'll be interesting to see what they can do. And then same said for St. Louis too. When are we going to see Ryan O'Reilly show up for this? So, does he get hot at some point? And, Tarasenko now 4 goals in 4 games. So he's ripping it up.
He is.
Which
indeed.
is what they need.
We are we know we're about to see Oscar Sundqvist. That's my dog. Oscar Sundqvist get suspended. He's going in for an in-person hearing after that hit on Grzelcyk.
Which is garbage to me. I honestly thought that was garbage. I mean, the penalty I'm cool with, but the hearing is garbage, if you want my opinion.
I think that if you're giving him that, then you should have probably at least given Torrey Krug a penalty for his charge.
Exactly.
That was a charge.
He
no
got up
doubt
and
about it.
he was gunning for somebody.
Oh, yeah.
And what's his face got off the ice and on the bench, so he targeted somebody else. And so if you're not going to suspend him, why are you suspending Sundqvist for a hit that, to me, yeah, it was boarding, but the guy changed direction so quick, you can't do anything about it. So why is that suspension?
Fortunately for the Blues, I think they can find a way.
Yeah. And I'm hoping for the Blues, too, at some point during Games 3 and 4, if we get to see at least Vince Dunn come back, because...
Yes. And Robert Thomas.
Yeah, and Robert Thomas would be great, too.
It's pretty remarkable that they won that game without those two guys.
Right, because for me,
some of their key depth players.
St. Louis has definitely struggled a little bit on the power play, and Vince Dunn is a big factor in that because he knows how to cycle the puck very well and shoot from the point. So
I'll tell you who looked like he belonged was Tyler Bozak.
Dude, I mean, he looks good.
Bozak had a nice little game for himself, and it's this St. Louis Blues team. I was thinking about it. I want to get your thoughts on this. We've had these teams since Pittsburgh won the Cup. Detroit won the Cup in 2008, and it was almost like, okay, that's the last of that, like Detroit,
that dynasty.
Dallas, Colorado, New Jersey, all those teams that had won before. That Detroit Cup there was kind of the last of that old era.
Sure.
In comes the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Boston Bruins,
LA Kings,
which were sort of a throwback to the old way of playing, but they were the new team doing it, and then maybe you toss in a name like the San Jose Sharks have been there throughout this whole, really the last 12 years. They've been quite effective, and they've been to the finals a couple times. But in terms of the teams that have won, it's Boston, Chicago, Pittsburgh, LA,
pretty much.
That's it.
And Washington,
Washington 1 year, and really Washington maybe could have one other cup if they hadn't blown it a couple times. Yeah. But Washington has always been, at least in terms of regular season, they might be the best regular season team in the last 10 years.
They probably got more President's Trophies.
Tons of President's Trophies. So when you think about that, and you go, okay, Boston, this is just another iteration. Yeah, they won. It was 8 years ago when they last won. They have a different team now, but a lot of those core pieces, Bergeron's still there, Chara's there. I mean, your Pasternak's new, Marchand wasn't
the same Marchand.
Right. Yeah. He's much better now, but I mean, this team has a lot of those familiar pieces. When you look at the Blues, this is just I don't remember if they win the cup, they really are going to be the odd team out. We're going to look at this team like the 2006 Carolina Hurricanes. Like how what?
Right.
What? Cam Ward won
getting the right matchups at the right time,
they're a strange team because on the one hand, I think we thought that they could maybe do this in years past, and I mean even at the beginning of the season, if you said, "Oh, this St. Louis Blues team's going to make the finals," you'd go, "Really? Okay, I can see
it's possible. Yeah,
it's possible. Yeah, they get the right matchups and they get good goaltending, and you probably think at the beginning of the year that means that Jake Allen figured it out,
right? Because I mean we've seen Jake Allen steal a series before.
Sure. So yeah, now he's really good at opening the door, closing it,
holding the clipboard,
opening it again, and invariably closing it.
Wow.
No, they don't do that.
Let's spend the next half an hour ripping on Jake Allen.
Well, I think I just heard he just opened the door. There, he closed it.
Wait.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Moving on.
So, yeah. Anyways, this Blues team is a strange one and really an anomaly. I think in terms of the teams that we've seen come before. Perhaps this Blues team wins, and suddenly we're going to see a whole new wave of teams. Because if you think, I mean, it's not beyond the realm of possibility to think that Boston could be back here next year. But really, you got to think Tampa Bay, Toronto. There's some heavy. Washington even could come back into the mix. I mean, they were tired. It wouldn't surprise me if they were able to get back into it. I think
Colorado's going to start throwing themselves in the mix soon.
They're going to be good. I think we're about to see a different wave of teams, and either the Bruins win the cup here, and it's that Detroit win in 2008. It's the last of that era of teams, or this Blues team wins. And maybe we, then suddenly we look and we go, all right, this is the new, this is kind of your last year or just kind of a random team takes it. And then we go, here comes your Colorados, your Tampa, your Toronto, even a team like Dallas, who's really moving up the food chain. And there's going to be some swaps here where we're going to see some teams that we've always grown to expect them to be very good. And they may not make it to the finals for a while. So
yeah, that would be interesting.
Just a thought. Your prediction for Game 3?
St. Louis.
St. Louis takes Game 3.
I think maybe 4-2, something like that. Again.
I'll be honest. I'm just overtime all the way. Give me that overtime. I wouldn't mind it to be like 4-4 going in overtime. Or if there's only going to be 4 goals, can we just kind of spread them out throughout the game? Although I will say that, for what was it? It was basically like 45 minutes of scoreless game. It was a fantastic game.
Sure.
Game 2 is one of the best games that I've seen in these playoffs, I think. It was thrilling.
It was fun to watch. I will give you that.
The Bruins need to get more shots on goal. They only had 23 shots on goal.
Yeah, not that. And that's another reason why I was kind of shaking my head when, Binghamton's second star. I'm like, what? I mean, he did make some good saves, but I'm like,
21 of them.
After those first 2 goals, and you still want to give it to him? I mean, like, what?
Legitimately, he made 7 saves per period. Not even 7 saves per period because he had to stop something in overtime.
I'd rather give the second star to the goalpost behind Tuukka Rask.
There you go. Beauty. Okay, well, that's Game 3.
That's Game 3.
I'm going to say that St. Louis and the Bruins go to overtime. That's all I'll give.
All right.
And then I'll tweet out my pick for the overtime goals.
Dude, winner.
Let's go to Wallet Hub. No, not a new sponsor. It totally sounded like they might be. I guess they do something with credit cards. No freaking idea why they're doing an article on 2019's best cities for hockey fans, but they have a list, and number one on the list for NHL franchises in the U.S., I should say, is Detroit. That's our city.
Pretty sweet brag.
Number one overall is Boston. The way they did this was they have the NHL rank and an NCAA rank, and that determines where you fall. Boston,
There's some other factors in there too, but I mean, for the most part, those are the two biggest ones.
Boston, third best NHL rank and the top NCAA rank. I don't think there's any doubting it there. Although one thing I was thinking was, okay, Detroit, we're really not like, what about Michigan? What about Michigan State? But I guess they're putting Ann Arbor in its own city. They're not counting Lansing towards it. They're not going to include a city like Flint, even though it's an hour outside of Detroit. I don't know. I guess we can split hairs all we want, but if you had to say, let's pull this away and go state by state. Your top 3 hockey states.
Ooh, in the U.S.
In the U.S., yeah.
I'd probably
there aren't states in Canada.
Minnesota. Oh, I know territories. Thank you. I'd probably take Minnesota number 1, throw in Michigan at number 2, and then after that, I might go. Honestly, I might throw in California at number 3.
Ooh, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
over Boston, over Massachusetts. It's small. Granted.
Yeah, I don't know. That's number 3 would be tough, but
yeah, I think that I would probably I would give Detroit the nod and say Detroit is the top hockey city. Michigan is the top hockey state. I mean, if you think about all the great college hockey going on in the UP, and you come down, you've got teams in Michigan State and Michigan, and
I love having the USA development right here.
Yeah, and the USA development.
Gosh.
Yep, that's just down the road from us. And then of course you have the Detroit Red Wings. You also have the Grand Rapids Griffins. That's some solid hockey, all within. Granted, you can't go to Houghton, Michigan, in just a couple hours. That's about 8 hours away, but it's a big place. I would give Boston probably number 2, and then Minnesota, I would go number 3. Their high school stuff's great. Their NHL team, I don't know. It's almost like the NHL is 3rd or 4th to the other college programs in the area, and so that kind of in a way turns me off of Minnesota a little bit. But just a little fun list. If you want to find that, go to wallethub.com and search for best cities for hockey fans. We had some thoughts on Phil Kessel. He denied a trade to the Minnesota Wild, and we don't know what the trade was. I haven't seen anything about it. We thought maybe Zucker at one point, but no idea who it was. Kessel obviously not willing to go there,
which is weird too, because that's where he played college hockey.
Yeah.
So you'd think, okay, he's familiar with the place.
He's probably like, holy crap, it's cold as balls there. I don't want to go there.
Well, maybe that might be it too, but...
I mean, Phil Kessel, to me, trade him to Florida.
Dude,
he'd go to Florida. It's a guarantee.
Would he, though?
Oh,
so
yeah.
He's got a list of 8 teams that he can put on there that he wants to go to. And I'm assuming that probably of those 8 teams, 7 of them are legit contenders.
Get rid of Mike Hoffman, bring in Phil Kessel. Done. You're welcome.
Yeah, although I will say, who is it? Rick Tocchet, he's in Arizona right now.
Arizona, yeah.
He has a great relationship with Rick Tocchet. He basically came out, I think, in one interview and said Rick Tocchet is the greatest assistant coach ever. So would he consider putting Arizona on that list? And if you're Arizona, would you even want him? I would say yes.
Oh, yeah.
But, compared to what they got now.
Especially if he's willing to, to me, if somebody's willing to go and play in Arizona, God bless him.
God bless them.
They did turn things around this year. They could be a decent team next year, maybe make the playoffs. But it still is not exactly your hockey hotbed.
Right.
You go from Toronto, probably the hottest of the hotbeds, to Pittsburgh, pretty darn high up there, especially in terms of U.S. markets. And then Arizona, which I feel like Phil Kessel might do really well in a place where nobody cares.
Or where he is like the guy, right? The celebrity. Toronto probably wasn't the guy, right? Not the celebrity there, you would have to probably say.
Yeah.
I mean, he was one of the stars, but
They
Pittsburgh,
just
right?
weren't
It's
very
all
good.
when you go to Pittsburgh, right? It's all Crosby all the time and Malkin, a slice of him on the side, and that's it.
I also wondered if he would be willing to go to St. Louis to go be with Tyler Bozak, because they were roommate, like they love each other. They're like best friends.
Yeah, but
in Toronto.
they don't have the cap space to do it at this point.
Well,
So-
they could trade somebody,
I'm sure they could. You'd probably trade Tyler Bozak.
or the Penguins could eat some of his salary, and Phil Kessel could be being paid by like 5 different teams.
Well, regardless wherever Kessel goes, unless it's to like a bottom feeder team like Ottawa or Arizona that have a lot of cap space, Pittsburgh's going to take some cap back.
Yeah, yeah, maybe it's only $6 million.
Yeah,
because Toronto has 2 of it.
that's right.
Apparently, the Wild are turning to William Nylander and the Leafs. Nylander is due a pretty fatty bonus.
A fatty
on
bonus.
July 1st. Yes, a fatty bonus. Is there any chance that the Leafs trade William Nylander?
No, I'm with you on this one. I don't think so. I think there's a slight chance that they might. I would maybe give it a 3% chance. And I only say that because, to me, it comes down to Kadri, right? And when I say Kadri, it's like how much do they value that third line center position? Because, the Leafs are going to be up against the cap here pretty soon with a bunch of new guys getting contracts, and we're probably going to talk a little bit about Mitch Marner's contract situation, right? So whatever plays out there, you got to they're probably going to have to get rid of some cap space somewhere. Now, are they looking at maybe Kadri because they can probably get a decent return for a former 30 goal scorer who's only getting $4 million?
We know, actually, I think it was Elliot Friedman today tweeted out that the Leafs and Zaitsev are working together to find a place for him.
Oh, a fresh start.
He wants a fresh start. Leafs would like to shed him.
Oh, their salary, coming off
a $4.5 million or 4-ish, 4.1 or something like that. He would. I mean, that certainly alleviates. I think that what it does is, in reality, I think it probably, if you're able to actually deal him in time, it's probably giving you enough money to be able to
4.5.
sign Gardner.
Oh, now there's a thought.
Right, 4.5. You think, well, Gardner coming off the books, he was making 5 something. 5, maybe it was exactly 5.
And I think Gardner's probably going to get around that $6-ish million range.
Gardner was making he had a cap hit of 405. So you think Gardner probably looking for like 5, 6?
I would say 6, given the market right now.
I think if he wants to play in Toronto, he will probably need to take 5. 5 times 5.
And that's not out of the realm as a possibility. And I think that's probably what he's worth. But I think as a free agent, given the lack of quality defenseman not named Erik Karlsson, he could easily get 6. So again, it goes to your point. Does he want to stay in Toronto and help continue build this thing that he's been building with, Morgan Riley on the back end for so long and, see this thing through? But that'd be interesting to see. And getting rid of Zaitsev's contract would create the necessary cap space that they would need to get Gardner locked up.
Right. There's your 4.5. Right now they only have they essentially have just under $9 million in cap space, and you can go 10% over the cap right now. So we'll say they have 18 million, but then they have to figure out a way to get down. So, I mean, you also have to re-sign Janssen and Kasperi Kapanen. Yeah, Mitchell Marner. It's going to be an interesting. I mean, it's Patrick Marleau. Like, you got to look at that. Man, it's.
Well, does that number also include Nathan Horton's money coming off the books when you put him on LTIR?
That's a good point.
Too? So.
That's a really good
There's
point.
There's another $5 million.
That actually doesn't include that. So, okay, you're right. All right. So, we've got an extra $5 million to work with. So, man, I feel terrible for the guy, what happened to him, all those concussions, but good on you for still making $5.3 million.
But you got to think long term too, because guys like Travis Dermott are going to need new contracts.
Sure.
Who else too on Toronto?
Yeah, I mean
there'll be other guys that are coming up, and
that also is where they've signed a couple guys from Russia. I know that their hope is that at least one Rasmus Sandin or Timothy Liljegren is able to come up and be on the blue line, or if not both. But they do have, their pipeline is pretty decent, and also Jeremy Bracco has been tearing up the AHL. I think that he's poised to come in and be on, whether it be Matthews' wing, Kadri's wing, or Tavares' wing. He's poised to be able to come in and score 20, 25 goals, I think, in his rookie season. Like, he's that good. He's 22 years old, so he's gotten 4 years in the American Hockey League to where he's really been able to develop, and he's developing into a nice scorer.
79 points in 73 games, I think, at the AHL level.
And in the AHL, that's pretty fantastic.
Good. Yeah.
You don't see guys with a point per game in the AHL very often. So, I think there's some good players coming. Not to mention, Ian Scott won the goaltender of the year in the what was it? Is that the QMJHL?
Quebec Major Juniors.
Yeah. So they do have some guys coming. It's going to be a challenge. I think somebody's got to move. Obviously, you can bring back a guy like Ron Hainsey at $1 million and you're totally fine. He may be back simply because what else do you do? It's almost like he's the new Roman Polak for the Leafs. Like, fine, bring him back, sign him.
If I'm Dubas, I don't bring him back just because I know Babcock's going to try to play him 25 minutes a night, and I want to get some of these younger guys in there myself.
Yeah.
If it was me.
Yeah.
So
at the same time, though, you do want to, who you're getting.
Right.
And I also think
dependable, for sure.
Babcock's got to go. If he gets these nice new pieces in, Sandin and Liljegren, one of the two, and he's told these guys need to develop. And so, Hainsey, that's great. Maybe one of them plays with Hainsey on the third pairing.
We'll see.
We shall indeed see. It's going to be an interesting offseason for the Leafs. Can you move Patrick Marleau? That is the question.
No.
Is he willing to go anywhere?
I don't know if it's so much if he's not willing to get, what's his no movement clause? Is it a full no movement, can't go anywhere?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, if I'm Patrick Marleau, you're at the end of your career, right? And you have a chance with Toronto to be a cup contender. And honestly, I would say if you're Toronto and you can move him, if you have teams willing to take him, they're not going to want to take more than half his salary. So are you willing to eat half the salary to move him and give up more pieces probably? Because that's all this is for Toronto when they want to move him, right? They call up teams, be like, hey, we want to move Marleau. Oh, quote unquote, it's a salary dump. So,
well, sure, it's a salary dump, but at the same time, a lesser team is getting a player that could play in their top 9.
Sure. Yeah, he can play top 9 still, for sure. But are you willing to take on that salary for a year?
Right.
I don't know.
Right. And I think ultimately he should hopefully find his way down to the fourth line as the season goes on. But we'll see. I think that's all we've got for this show. We are rapidly approaching the NHL draft. The draft is in less than 4 weeks.
Yeah. Can I be honest with you though? I'm slightly leaning towards, and if it wasn't for New Jersey's need for a center, I would slightly almost want to favor Capo Caco at this point.
No.
I don't know.
Wrong.
I don't know. I've watched this kid and just his size and possession numbers.
Here's why.
So good.
This is what I'm going to say. Is that when there's a guy who's been at number one, he's been the number one de facto number one for this draft, people have thought that he'd be the number one pick. I remember reading about him when he was 14 years old and people saying, this guy's going to be good. And he was 15. This guy's going to be really good.
Sure.
He might be the top pick in the draft. So, people have known about him for a long time. So people have been watching him very, very closely, especially these last 2 years. I don't think that KK has gotten the same level of exposure and the same level of scrutiny to his game. So I think at this point, he's just been up at the top for so long that there's something in us that what if there's someone else? And I think that Jack Hughes is phenomenal, and he's going to be such a good player in this league that
I won't disagree with you. He's going to be great.
It is so crucial that New Jersey takes a center.
It is, and that's why I do think he'll still go number one. But Come on,
unless
if you're
you
the
think
Rangers.
that you're going to lose Taylor Hall.
That's true.
If you think Taylor Hall might run, but see, even then,
But getting a guy like that, you're like, hey, Taylor, you hang around a little bit. Guess what? You get to play with Jack Hughes. So
I mean, I don't think he's mad about playing with Heischer.
No, I wouldn't be either.
So
Heischer's fine. I don't have a problem with him. I don't know if he's a true number one, but still, he's a good, like Band-Aid at the moment.
I think he's a number one. I think he's a number one.
Do you think
I
so?
think long term he's a number one.
Okay.
Oh,
wow.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, he's already very good defensively too. So
he is.
I mean,
he is absolutely.
Let's say he not stylistically, but let's say he ends up being a guy like a Ryan Johansson or a Ryan O'Reilly, where he's a number one. They are number one centers, but they are not number one centers that you're
production wise.
In terms of is he going to win an Art Ross Trophy? No, he's not that guy. Jack Hughes could, Kako could. These two guys. This is a much better draft.
Yeah.
Poor Nolan Patrick. I hope he ends up being a decent player.
He'll be a number 3 center.
I can't not think about him when in his rookie season at training camp when he had that rash on his face. That is how I think about him every single time I hear his name.
Every time I hear
Patrick.
Taylor Hall's name, I always think about that giant cut he got on his forehead from the skate.
Yeah.
Speaking of mutilation.
Mutilation. Well, hopefully we see some more mutilation in Game 3. I mean, the St. Louis.
I am
Blues
loving the hard hitting so far. These finals, which
they
is great.
They are blowing each other up, and it is a lot of fun. Game 3 Saturday. We'll be watching, and we'll be back next week to talk about Game 3 and jump into some Game 4 predictions. And we'll start moving towards analyzing some of these potential draft picks and where your team might go from here. We're getting to the fun part. The pre-draft episodes are some of my favorite episodes to do because there are so much that can happen. And I think that this year is maybe going to be one of the wildest years we've ever seen at the draft.
Yeah, I might agree with you. Not so much for the actual players that get picked, but for the amount of trades I think that could happen. Yeah,
because of how much salaries are about to just explode for high-end players.
Dude,
these
there's
younger
never
guys
been
coming up.
so many quality RFAs I've never seen in the market at the same time. So
I think what it does is it shows how good the league is getting because all these teams drafted these guys. They're all around the same age, and they're all about to get paid because they're all freaking good.
Right.
So it's just a youth explosion in the NHL. It's very fun. I think back to early 2000s when it was like, who's going to be the next Steve Yzerman and Joe Sakic? Because there's not much right now in terms of offense. There was some good defensemen, and certainly that's Sidney Crosby was definitely the beginning of that new wave of player. But
right,
we'll see. Okay, well that is our show. We'll chat with you on Twitter @OT Hockey Talk. We'll talk to you this week.